You're listening to The Breakfast Show on Faith FM, and it's now time for another quiz question. And after the quiz question, we are going to be talking about what's in the news today. We want to talk about dementia.
I thought you were going to talk about googly eyes.
We are going to be talking. I want to talk about the googly eyes.
Oh, man.
Let's talk about googly eyes. And let's talk about the petrol rationing as well.
Yeah.
The $40 per person.
Right.
Oh, wait, where?
Here in Australia, the
$40
federal
per
government
transaction.
is
I haven't
considering
heard that yet.
$40 per transaction. So that would buy you about
Nationwide?
16 liters nationwide. Yeah.
So 40 litres or $40?
$40, which they say at
16 liters.
16 litres at current prices.
Yeah.
And that's probably going to increase and decrease the amount of litres you're going to get.
So,
So
only
it's
a
not-
day? Or
Yeah.
only, like,
Per
how do they
transaction.
know?
Look, I don't. So it was leaked. It was
Yeah.
leaked. Some of the secret plans from the federal government to
You've got
curb it.
Connections in high
No,
places?
it was just
No,
on the news
just
a
on the
second
news.
ago.
Oh, I did well.
Yes, I do. I do have connections in high places. I have an ultra secret access to an ultra secret service called Google.
Googly
I thought you were going to do,
Google.
like, what was that AI name that your
Onesimus.
phone's like, are you calling me this now? Joseph AI was
Are
having
you
a
calling me
conversation.
Shelby?
Yeah, Shelby.
Yeah, just for context here, I use Grok AI sometimes to
Yeah.
Oh, it's Grok.
yes, to talk some about information and get some of the news and so on. And this morning I came into the studio, I forgot to turn it off, and then I said, "Hey, good morning, Shelzy," and Grok says, "Hey, wait a minute, why are you calling me Shelby?"
Are you calling me Shelby now? Like, do I need to change my name in your system? Like, what?
It was funny.
Oh, anyway.
All right.
Quiz time.
Quiz time. It's quiz time. All right. We are up to number 3.
Yeah.
So what position was held by the man whose ear Peter cut off? So in the... Where were they when
In the Garden of Gethsemane.
it was Gethsemane. And they came to arrest Jesus. Peter cut off, yes, the ear of somebody, and he has a title or a position of what he is. Do you know what that is? What position was held by that man whose ear Peter cut off?
Yep.
Lindsay got it. How you going, Joseph? Okay,
know
you guys
this
can
one.
text us on 0491 064 669. Yeah, these guys have got it here, so let's see if you guys can get it. It's from John 18, 0491 064 669. What position was held by the man whose ear Peter cut off?
Rightio. Well, let's jump into some stories right now. So I have got a story about a woman who is an anesthesiologist who actually adopted one of her patients.
How does that work?
Well, so this is set in Nebraska, and she had a patient come in, a 4-year-old little boy named True, and he's a little African-American boy, and she noticed that
His name is True.
True. That's just his name,
Nice.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
And 4 years old, and he was waiting all by himself for his heart surgery. Like, he was born with congenital heart disease and was in the foster system from the time he was born and for the past 4 years in foster. And when it came time for his heart surgery to take place, his caseworker got COVID, and so she couldn't come along and sit there and wait with him in the waiting room and support him. So he was just there all by himself. I have no idea how he
poor
got there. Like,
kiddo.
if somebody else just dropped him off and said, "See you later."
He was 4 years old.
4 years old. Now, I
that's
remember
so
when I was
tiny.
little, my mum used to tell me that
That'd be
when
very scary
she
for
was
him.
4 years old, she broke her arm and had to go to hospital, or like something happened. She had to go to hospital and she had to stay there overnight for a few days, right? And she said, you know, I was 4 years old and my parents couldn't be there. They could only come and visit for a couple of hours sometimes. And I was so lonely and so by myself and alone. But can you imagine a little boy who's got no actual like parents who love him or anybody consistent in his life to just be with him there? And like 4 years old, they don't know what's going on. Like the, you know, fluorescent lights glaring and the beeping sounds and the
hospital would be-
screaming down the
it
hall.
would be very, it would be so scary.
Yeah, exactly. So this little kid is there by himself, all alone. And so Dr. Amy Beath saw him there and her heart went out to him. And she was like, oh, you
God
know what?
bless her.
I am going to like just check in with the caseworker and find out more about this kid. So he's one of 7 siblings, got another 6 siblings, and they're all in foster care. And so she herself has got 3 biological children and already 3 adopted children. But she called her husband and was like, hey, I'm going to need to talk to you tonight. Have an open mind. And she was like, we're having another one, basically.
Wow.
And he fell in love with the kids straight away. And within a month of the surgery, they adopted this little kid. Because shortly after she had checked in with the caseworker, she, like, maybe a week later was like, are you someone who would consider adopting him? And she was like, yes, I've already been thinking about it. So not only did she adopt little True, but when she discovered that he had 6 siblings, she also found other people in her own close network. So her own sister and other close co-workers at the hospital and other people in their town were all able to keep this family together in some way by each of them adopting one kid.
What?
Not only this, but they
Really?
had a whole mass adoption ceremony on the same day. They had like a communal adoption party.
Wow. That is so beautiful.
Yeah.
Do we know how old the other siblings were, or roughly? Were they older than him, or some of them younger?
Not 100% sure. I don't think I saw that information. But yeah, it's just so beautiful that, you know, this little kid, he's able to stay in contact with his own siblings as the years go on, because they're basically now officially his cousins, some of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're officially
Adopted cousins, actual siblings.
Slash siblings.
Yeah.
That is what an amazing story.
Yeah.
Look, I find it fascinating. I take my head off for parents of adopted children, because, you know, and I know that you know, some parents, like I was talking to a couple, and they had, I think, you know, like 6 or 7 adopted kids. And they were saying the beauty of the adopted kids, when you tell them, is that, look, your own natural child, you can't really choose, but you have been chosen.
Yeah.
And that means it's an extra step of love. And it's true.
I know some kids have been bullied over the years for being adopted and being told, oh, you know, nobody wanted you, you're adopted. But like their parents have taught them to snap back and say, well, actually, I was chosen. I was deliberately chosen to be loved.
That's right. Because so many natural kids are born and they are not necessarily wanted.
No, and they might be raised only half-heartedly, whereas an
point?
Adopted child will often be raised with a great deal of love.
Yeah. And look, and there is not to say that there definitely are some challenges. I was talking to some foster parents, and the foster parents, because with foster parents, what happens is that their children, their biological parents are often alive somewhere, and then the kids grew up thinking, like, why isn't my mom wanting to care for me? Why is my dad, you know? And of course there's brokenness,
just
dysfunction,
incapable of actually raising a child.
That's right. But then sometimes they do visit them, because per the laws they are allowed to visit, you know, their biological family, and they want to stay there, but then they have to go back, and the parents they don't have the ability to raise these children for like very
really
social
messy.
reasons. Can be messy. I think that it you know, would be challenging as well from a, like, you know, just from a raising perspective, because unfortunately a lot of times when these, you know, when a child comes into a person's home for adoption, we often don't know the full extent of the trauma that this child is carrying.
Yeah, and what that's going to like impact with their psychology as they get
That's
older.
right. So there's these extra amounts of patience and challenge and so on. And sometimes, look, and I have seen stories of adopted children that ended up becoming extremely successful human beings. But I also have seen stories of parents that really devoted and dedicated their entire lives raising the child. And the child doesn't turn out to grow, to develop as they hoped for. But I guess that this is the story that can happen with everyone.
Yeah.
That's the story of God, ultimately. God is trying to adopt us as well. And
we don't always work out the way he hopes, so.
No. But look, I think it's really, whenever I see someone choosing to adopt a baby or to adopt a child into their care, my heart gets touched. And I think, man, this is the gospel. Like this, there's so much sacrifices that this family, they are doing, because, you know, they really want to foster and to care for a child of God.
Yeah.
That, you know, is that is there alone in the world, and they're receiving like God's care really firsthand. It's quite an amazing story. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, we've got Lincoln just texting in saying, "This is such a beautiful story. Praise God." Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so beautiful to see how God works on people's hearts in order for his love to go out into the whole world and to adopt young children as he adopts us into his family. Like, that's just so beautiful.
Yeah. Love it. So, okay, that's a beautiful story. When did it happen? Roughly, do we know?
So this began in 2022.
Okay, 2022.
So in the height of COVID going around, the caseworker was unable to turn up that day
Yeah.
because she'd caught it. So,
And I'm wondering if anybody listening, if you're listening to us today, if you have any stories with adoption, like, have you adopted a son, a daughter? Tell us a little bit about your relationship and your love for this child, the joys, the challenges. We would love to know. Text us here to 0491-064-669. Or have you been adopted? How was that of an experience?
I know a few people who are adopted, and I feel like the two people that I can think of off the top of my head who have been adopted are both men, and they're like, they don't know anything about their prior family, but they tend to be like very loving towards their wives. Like, they're just like wanting to give everything to their family that they possibly can. They're just like, because maybe their psychology is like, I wasn't wanted, or I wasn't able to be raised by my
I'm going to make sure that does not happen.
I am going to just give
my family,
all of my
kids.
love,
Yeah.
all of my everything to my family.
Yeah, let us know. 0491-064-669. That's our number to text here.
You're listening to the Breakfast Show podcast on Faith FM. Positively different.
Now it's time for our quiz answer, please, producer Shells.
Yeah, so everyone was pretty good and pretty much on track. So the position held by the man whose ear Peter cut off was the high priest servant.
Yep.
Okay.
Really
High
good.
priest servant.
Yeah.
All right. We are moving on now because, well, there's two things we want to talk about. Just one, just briefly touching.
Yeah.
That was just on the news today.
Yeah.
That because so the government has contingency plans for everything. Okay, let's just put it right there. It's normal. Every government has, and one of their contingency plans, I think it's dated from 2023. It's the contingency plan for like fuel liquid crisis. Like, what would the government do if we have a crisis of fuel liquids, liquid fuel, like petrol and diesel, like the ones that we're doing now. So it's not something that the government is just thinking now, which is a good thing. It's good to know that before this happens, someone was already thinking about it. The thing is that it was a document that was asked to be released under one of the National Transparency Acts by a former senator. And as he was revealing the document, one of the plans that is there is to limit how much fuel an individual can purchase per day.
Per day
or
per
per
transaction?
go. It's not clear. I haven't sent the document, but it's basically per transaction. But it would be preposterous to think that if you go into a petrol station, it's empty, and you're putting 40 liters and say, okay, you pay there, and then you go back, put more 40 liters, and then come pay. Yeah. I do not know. So how exactly they're going to be working with that. But the irony of that is that the Labor government is being accused of spending $150,000 in legal fees to try to keep that document secret.
What?
And now it's being released to the public anyway.
Okay.
So let's see what else is going to come up.
Why do you think they were trying to keep it secret?
Look, because I think that the reason being is that when these plans are very controversial. Like, I'll give you some examples. During the COVID times, I remember some people pointing out to some the COVID crisis was 2020.
Yeah.
2021, and there were some, I remember there being some European Union or Germany, I think, crisis for viruses, and what to do. And I think this was dated 2012, about 8 years before. And then a lot of people saying, oh, you see, it's a pandemic. It has been planned all along. They knew exactly what's going to happen, except that they have contingencies for that for every single catastrophe they can imagine, nuclear tragedies and so on. And the reason why they want to keep these things secret as much as they can is exactly so that people won't be freaking out or panicking or thinking, oh, you see, this is all planned and everything like that. So I think that's probably the reasons why. Yeah, why are you looking with me at that face?
Oh, I'm
Finding it
not
amusing?
looking-
You
I'm-
reckon it was a pandemic?
But let's be careful too, pandemic. Let's
Yeah.
be careful too because
Yeah.
nothing's in place yet.
Nothing's in place yet,
Yeah.
so they can change. This is just like a risk assessment document. That's what it is. You know, so I think that there's sometimes the media makes it a little bit more plump than it is. It's just like from my understanding, risk management can be that, it can be something else, but just something interesting there. However, I think that it's important. It's interesting because we are coming to a point where we're saying, hey, this crisis is the Middle Eastern crisis. We can't really see an ending to it yet. Donald Trump is saying that he's communicating with Iran to fix the problem, but then Iran responded and said, no, we're not.
Okay, so you were going to talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, I was going to talk a little bit about that.
I've got the
This is
document.
the war of narratives. Do you have the document? So producer Shell was going to
I'll
read the
scour
document.
it for you.
Scour it for you and see if she can find anything there. But look, again, this is just like a risk management. It's like more of an aspirational thing. Is that it's in case they need to put that into law, they already have some pre-work done. So that's a normal thing. In terms of the war of narratives, before we jump into our dementia conversation here, it's very interesting because Donald Trump said, "Look, I'll give you 48 hours for Iran to solve this problem. Otherwise, I'm going to bomb, all of their power plants." And then the same day, Iran says, "Okay, but I can actually have missiles that you don't know that can reach Europe." Number one. Number two, if you do that, then I'm going to bomb the energy facilities and water facilities of the Gulf countries. And then the next day, President Trump says, hey, we actually have been having some really productive conversations with the Iranians, and I'm not going to do anything in 48 hours anymore. I'm going to give them at least 5 days now. We can think through. I think we're going somewhere. And then the Iranian media came up and says, no, we're not talking. I mean, you didn't talk to anyone. And the American administration said, yeah, we have been talking to very influential leaders. And the Iranians like, no, we're not. So, you're just back down because we threatened you. So, as the proverb says, the first casualty of war is the truth. So
Right. Nobody knows.
So you see the
Only
narrative.
time will tell what has actually happened.
Who's right, who's wrong, who's telling
Yeah.
the truth, who's not. But just to highlight the war of narratives
Yeah.
that's
And
taking place. And Donald Trump came up with a new statement with this war of narratives now.
Sure.
And he's saying, no, actually we have received a very important and very precious and very expensive gift
I'm not going to tell you what
from
it is.
From Iran. I'm not going to tell you who gave it to me.
But
Not going to
it's
tell you
very
what it is, but
good
it's very.
gift.
And then someone asked, is this gift in the nuclear realm? And then he said, no, it's in the oil and gas realm. So nobody knows what it is.
Okay.
What
I
is
guess
this gift?
we'll find out
Maybe.
when he unwraps his present.
Yeah, maybe we will. All right. Speaking of presents, I want to talk about dementia now
Okay.
because there's an
Were we going to talk about googly eyes at some point?
after 8:00.
Okay.
we're going to talk about googly
All right.
eyes.
Okay.
We in this one there is in 2024 the Lancet, which was one of the most important medical journals. They published an article that nailed the 14 modifiable risk factors that, if tackled head on, could prevent or delay up to 45% of dementia cases worldwide. So imagine if we would have like half of the people that currently have dementia. Basically, it's actually saying this could have been prevented by modifiable lifestyle
Wow.
factors.
Okay.
And they're based in meta-analysis, bunch of
Yeah.
different researches. So the Lancet is a super serious, one of the gold standard medical journals in the world. So, but I didn't know all of these 14 modifiable factors. So I'm going to share with
Okay.
you what are the
us.
14, and then what is the 15th? Because just yesterday, there is an article in the Sydney Morning Herald where it was showing that a number of scientists were kind of frustrated that there is one factor that is not mentioned here, but it should have, which is the 15th factor.
Hey, if you have dementia or if you know someone with dementia, maybe this is something that you'll want to listen into. Look, we don't know what some of us might be experiencing. This is more likely you'll know somebody who has it than you might have it yourself. But hey, this is something to watch out for, or to see if you have some of these risk factors. Hey, let us know if any of this applies to somebody that you know, and we'll be able to get some more info to you.
Okay, let me get cracking into what they are. So first one is education. So the more education you have, less education is a risk factor. So keep studying, keep using your brain, keep learning new things. That's one way. And I think listening to the Breakfast Show is one way you can learn something new every day. So that's the first one. The second one is hearing loss. Untreated hearing problems, particularly at middle age, can really speed up the cognitive decline. Third one is hypertension, so high blood pressure, particularly in midlife. So managing stress and blood pressure can literally help to reduce the risk factor for dementia. So if it's uncontrolled, it's a problem. Smoking. It's one. I think that smoking is a risk factor for absolutely everything under the earth. So I'm actually quite surprised how we still have people that are smoking, or particularly young people flirting with these Juuls and these electronic cigarettes and so on. Smoking is the absolute risk factor for every single chronic disease you can find under the sun. But there you go. Smoking. The Bible talks about not being slave to any or addicted to any substance, and smoking is one of them. So God can give us He can help us to clear the temple of the Holy Spirit. Next factor is obesity. Okay. So carrying extra weight, it raises inflammation, and that inflammation harms the brain cells. Depression. Depression is another risk factor here. So it actually doubles the dementia risk if you are struggling with depression. So something to keep in mind. Physical inactivity, because sitting too much starves the brain of oxygen and of growth factors. Diabetes, if you have uncontrolled blood sugar, that damages the brain vessels. So that's another one. Excessive alcohol. So alcohol shrinks the brain over time. Traumatic brain injury. So one big hit or repeated knocks in your head can set the stage for later cognitive decline. Yeah. Air pollution, breathing dirty air, especially in this mid to later life, does cause inflammation to the brain. Social isolation, it's another one that the Bible, I think, prevents if you're living the Bible lifestyle, because church is designed to fight social isolation. Exactly. So loneliness later in life is as harmful as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Wow. The same effect on the brain. High LDL cholesterol. So too much of that bad cholesterol does clog the brain blood flow. And finally, untreated vision loss as well. So poor eyesight in older age cuts off stimulation to the brain. So if you're not seeing correctly, you're not stimulating your brain, the brain is not growing. So these are the 14 risk modifiable risk factors. The 15th one is diet. Now it's not there. You may have not noticed. We touched on LDL cholesterol here, but we didn't talk about diet. And this is the factor that people are saying, hey, it should have been included there. And guess what is the best diet?
I'm guessing plant-based.
Yeah, plant-based. They say a mix between a Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet, which is DASH diet is a diet to reduce hypertension. Okay. Which, if you go with a healthy, mostly whole foods, plant-based diet, you're already knocking all most of it. Most of that. The only difference between a Mediterranean diet and a good whole food plant-based diet is that the occasional inclusion of fish. Yeah. Like salmon and so on. So people that want to eat that, it's good for your brain. But a plant-based diet would knock that out, or a Mediterranean diet would also help out to reduce these risks considerably. So this is the news. Diet now being considered to be included as a modifier risk factor. And the reason why they haven't included before is just it's a bit hard to measure. Because smoking, you can ask, do you smoke? Yes or no? It's very easy to include that in the research. But diet is okay, tell me what do you eat every day for, and let's track what you're eating, your eating patterns for 10, 12 years. It's much harder to track. That's why they didn't include. But now they're saying, hey, we should include because it's totally related. You are what you eat. So there you go. I hope that they can bring some incentives, and I believe that following a biblical lifestyle, I think we crush all of these points. If you follow God's word, that will bring not only spiritual health to your heart, but also physical health to your brain.
You're listening to the Breakfast Show podcast on Faith FM. Positively different.
Now it's time for a very special interview.
All right, we have Maria Andrioli, our psychologist. She's going to be talking to us a little bit about forgiveness. Why is it so difficult to forgive, but at the same time, why forgiveness matter and how can we do it? Maria, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me, Skafy. Good to be back on here.
It's great to have you. Maria, can you tell us first about what is forgiveness and why is it important? Because I always often meet with people, they say, look, I wish that they could teach me at school how to forgive. This is like a life skill. It's so important. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there's a few things that I wish they taught me at school. But now that you mention it, forgiveness is probably one of them. But yeah, look, I want to talk about, two different types of forgiveness. So when you ask me, what is forgiveness? And I'll tell you, there's two main types. One is decisional forgiveness. This is actively like making the choice to forgive. And the other is emotional forgiveness. And this is actually like the feelings of forgiveness.
Okay.
And it's important to differentiate them because, sometimes we think forgiveness always has to mean that we feel that we forgive the person. But I like that we separate it here because it makes us see that it's actually much more of a choice.
Okay. Wow. And that's very fascinating because normally we would tend to think that forgiveness is just like the one thing. And if you're not feeling the effects of forgiveness, perhaps you haven't forgiven. So can you help us to understand a little bit more what is that first element of it, like the decisional forgiveness?
This is simply making the choice to forgive. This is like simply deciding that you're not going to seek revenge. You're going to relinquish your rights to revenge in that sense. You're not going to keep punishing the person. You're just choosing to let go of retaliation. And you may still feel hurt. You may still get a whole bunch of emotions when you think about what happened, but you've actively decided that you're not going to seek revenge.
Okay, so you're not going to retaliate. And you're saying to yourself, look, I'm giving up the fact that I'm not going to revenge or to try to avenge myself against that person. So that's the decision. But then you mentioned that you can still carry some, feelings. And I would imagine, what kind of feelings can we have? So are we talking about if you're feeling hurt by someone else, like, can you feel that you dislike a certain person if they done something for you or you don't want them in your life anymore? Is that a normal feeling and it is okay?
Yeah, I guess, when someone's really hurt us, like naturally we are going to feel angry and hurt. But I suppose once you've made that choice to forgive the person, some of that like deeper resentment may not be there anymore. And what you'll find is that once you've chosen decisional forgiveness, once you've just decided, I'm not going to hold this, I'm not going to retaliate, I'm not going to punish the person or do anything. I choose to forgive them. Over time, the emotional forgiveness will begin to catch up as well, and you'll begin to heal much faster. But obviously, letting go of those emotions isn't something that can happen straight away.
Okay.
And it doesn't mean that you haven't forgiven the person, It's just that the emotional forgiveness is something that takes time and sometimes can take much longer. Yeah.
And how do I know if the forgiveness process has gone through the point that the emotional forgiveness has also taken place? What are the elements that characterize this emotional forgiveness? You mentioned a few already. I think you mentioned that one of them being you don't have that deep resentment anymore. But others?
You may find the resentment starts to go away, the anger starts to go away whenever it comes up into your mind, and you may actually begin to feel more compassion and understanding towards the person and the event as well. So you're able to approach what happened from a place of compassion and understanding.
And how long can it take? Is there like some kind of scientific study that says, the emotional forgiveness can happen, after 2 months, or it does really vary from person to person, from case to case?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would be curious to know if there's research out there that looks at specific time frames, but at the same time, I think it's so it's so dependent on the person, on the context, on what's happened. You know, sometimes people it can take years for that emotional forgiveness sometimes, and for other situations it can be quite fast. But the emotional forgiveness does matter. You know, it's we don't actually, all the research on the health benefits of forgiveness happen mostly for emotional forgiveness, not so much the decisional forgiveness. It's usually once the emotions come that we start to see all those health benefits, and it doesn't impact us as badly.
And what happens if we choose not to forgive instead? You know, if we don't go through these steps of deciding, hey, you know what, I don't want to, I'm not going to harbor that, I'm going to let it go. If we don't go through these steps of forgiving, what can happen?
Well, choosing not to forgive is essentially choosing to hold on to chronic stress. Because when we are not forgiving a person, usually we stay quite angry at them, or if not angry, like we tend to harbor negative emotions for much longer. This whole sense of like punishing a person actually has a really bad impact on our bodies. We stay in a constant state of fight or flight. Our stress hormones stay elevated. Our blood pressure goes up. Basically, we become vulnerable to all of the diseases that are linked to stress because, like I said, not forgiving is holding on to chronic stress.
Okay. And what about is there like an easy step-by-step way that I can practice this forgiveness? So I'm making sure that I'm not skipping anything. How do you put that in practice? You just say in your head, okay, I forgive and that's it, problem solved, or is there more to it?
So there's a really popular model. It's a bit of an acronym, which, you know, some people love acronyms and some people don't, but I actually really like this model specifically. And I actually think that even though it's not, you know, a Christian model, it's actually a really biblical approach to forgiveness. It's just based on the research of what works. But it's called the REACH model. So REACH, and you can find the REACH model easily online. But basically, the R stands for recalling the hurt. So if you think about, you know, something that really hurt you or a person that hurt you, we can use this example. But first, you just recall what happened. You're acknowledging it honestly. You know, you're not pretending it didn't happen, not minimizing it. You're just being honest about how they hurt you. The E is for empathize, showing empathy. So this is where we try to come from a place of understanding the other person's humanity. Like we're not excusing what happened, but we're just coming from a place of empathy and trying to understand that they're human. And there could have been many of their own wounds that led to them doing what they did. And then we've got the A, which this is a pretty powerful step. So the A stands for altruism. So this is like offering someone the altruistic gift of forgiveness. So it's recognizing that you're giving them a gift. And I like this. It's quite biblical. It's about remembering the times when you needed forgiveness yourself. And I think that's why, you know, God calls us to forgive others as we've been forgiven. So it's remembering the times when we needed forgiveness, we received it, and forgiveness is a gift we're choosing to give to them. The C is committing to forgiveness. This is about making a decision. And I think this is where decisional forgiveness comes in. We are just simply choosing, now I'm going to forgive this person. You can write it down, you can tell someone about it, but it's actually making a commitment to forgiving that person. And the final step is the H. This is important. It's holding on to forgiveness, because just because you've forgiven someone once decisionally doesn't mean like that's the last time you have to forgive whatever they did. You'll find that your brain will keep bringing memories back up, and it'll keep making you like want to fester on what happened and get angry about it all over again. And this is when you have to continuously choose forgiveness over and over again.
That is fascinating, because we often speak about forgive and forget, right? I forgave and I forgot now. But as you mentioned, a lot of times that situation that brought so much pain and hurt will surface up again. And so what you're saying is that it doesn't mean that you haven't forgiven. It just means that you have to remind yourself that you have forgiven. Is that right?
Exactly. And I think, yeah, your brain like will continuously bring up hurtful memories that make it feel like it's happening again, especially if something really big has happened. Part of like trauma is reliving. We relive what happened in our minds, and that can make it very hard to move on from, which is why it's like a continual thing to hold on to forgiveness.
And one question, I've seen cases of people, and that they say that, let's say that they have a falling out, or someone perpetrated a caused hurt to someone else, and then they come to that person and say, "Oh, you are a Christian, you have to forgive me, you must forgive me," like kind of almost like putting a person against the wall and kind of forcing them to forgive. What have you seen these situations happening before, and like how can we do? Can someone just force you to forgive them, or how does that work? What could we say in such a situation?
Well, I think like I just said before, forgiveness is a gift, right? It's a gift that a person chooses to give. Like whether or not forgiveness is the right thing to do is another story, but ultimately, it's not something that you can force someone to give you. It has to come from their own will, right? You can't impose forgiveness on someone else. Even just from a moral and Christian perspective, you can't force someone into doing anything.
Yes, absolutely. Look, yeah, and I've seen these cases, particularly in relationships where one of the parties was, abusing the other one and saying, "Yeah, but you have to forgive me because you're a Christian, and you just have to." Because which leads me to the next question: does forgiveness automatically lead into reconciliation with the person that has perpetrated the harm or the pain in you, or is there a space to say, "Hey, look, in some cases, yes, in some cases, not necessarily. The best thing to do is just to stay away from that source of harm"?
Yeah, I think some people are scared of forgiveness because they think it means allowing that person back in. And they think it means like letting go of their defenses that may be there for a very good reason. So forgiveness doesn't mean letting the person back in. It doesn't mean trusting the person even, or staying in a harmful situation. You can make the choice to forgive. You can make the choice not to punish a person, not to seek revenge, not to retaliate. You can heal in forgiveness and heal emotions over time, but you can still choose not to allow that person into your life, or at least not allow that person in your life in the same way they were in the past, right? You can have boundaries with someone and still forgive them.
Very interesting. Yes, because having boundaries, I think it's one of the things that a lot of people that I talk with, they sometimes they don't differentiate between these two things. They think that, look, if I'm forgiving someone, I'm letting them off the hook. I'm not holding them accountable for the damage that they have caused, and if I don't want to forgive because I don't want to bring that person back in. But as you clarified, that's not necessarily the situation, is it?
No, we still need to be wise and look for, I guess, for people wanting to study, because I know forgiveness is also a very biblical topic. I think the story of Joseph is quite powerful when it comes to forgiveness. Just studying that and reading the process by which he forgave his brothers. But he also, it didn't mean he was unwise and foolish about it. He still tested them. And he still, went through a process of seeing if they were trustworthy, despite having forgiven them as well. So I think forgiveness also calls for wisdom on how we approach the person after they have hurt us, and what kind of boundaries we need to set up while still, choosing not to get revenge or anything like that as well.
Maria, thank you so much for helping us to understand a little bit more about forgiveness, decisional forgiveness, emotional forgiveness. I definitely learned some great new things from our conversation today. And if you are struggling with forgiveness, if there's like someone that has hurt you and you haven't yet made that decision to forgive, you can text us here to 0491 064 669 with hashtag forgive. And we have a resource that we'd love to give away to you. It's the book Forgive to Live by Dr. Dick Tibbetts. It's a book that will help you to go through the steps of forgiveness, so that you can experience the peace of mind that you once had that was disrupted by an event, and by extending forgiveness, we can reclaim that peace back into our hearts. Maria, thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your knowledge, and your experience with us. We're looking forward to talk to you again next week. Again, the number is 0491 064 669, #forgive, and we will send you a book on that topic.
Thanks for being a part of the Faith FM family. Join our community on Facebook or get in touch at 1-800-FAITH-FM.